have you any thoughts? What kind of scenarios of its liberation should be used in this situation?
You mean with respect for safety and arrest for the people there?
Yes.
Good. I've turned up the volume, so hopefully you can hear me and I'm not too loud. The concern, of course, it could be possible. I don't think that any of the weapons that Putin is using in Ukraine will really danger the reactor in its release. What it could do, though, is shut down. There are some storage tanks and such associated with the reactor that have radioactive materials, and you could erupt one of those and it would spill out and move. It will not be a Chernobyl, but it's certainly a concern. And people, it's just, in many ways, radiation is a much bigger frightening fear than what the Putin's troops. To be honest, people should just take care. Hopefully we can keep the reactor up. So I'm concerned they're very, very cold, and without electrical power and the rest, they're suffering terribly. And so I would keep Zaporizhzhia as online as possible. Now, I don't know if the Kremlin has it controlled, then they may turn it off and let the people freeze. That's part of the unfortunate use of resources to carry out a war.
I don't know how to ask better. What should residents of the area around the nuclear power plant know? What should they be aware of to be ready for some emergency situations?
The most important thing, of course, is to have food and water. So what they ought to do before any incident happens, they ought to probably just store some water that they'll need, because without water, you can't go more than a few days. You can go longer without food, but what they should do is cover up whatever they can, put some food in closets or other areas where if there is a potential release into the atmosphere, it would not contaminate their food. Anything that's covered, as long as I've got water in a bottle or water in a container, but anything that's out on the ground or at least accesses the act. Now, I hope, do they have sufficient radiation monitoring equipment operating now in Ukraine? I don't know. I would hope so. I would think the United Nations, their nuclear campaign, might be providing some support for the people in Ukraine. And I'm speaking probably too fast for people who are understanding my English.
No, it's okay, and I'm going to translate this for my report. Yes, so that's okay. How can and what should the state do for protecting the civilian population in the event of a nuclear disaster?
Yeah, the disaster would probably be something similar to Chernobyl, but at a much lower level. What the Russians, when the Kremlin was operating the Chernobyl reactor, they did things that internally disrupted the reactor and tore it apart. It turned out to become a steam bomb, and it just blew the top off the reactor. This will not happen with Zaporizhzhia. What it could be, I don't think that anything that they have that could attack the reactor would assault the primary system. It would probably be storage areas or such where radioactive materials contained in water and others. That could produce a cloud of radioactive moisture, might move across, and people should be careful. That's the reason I said the most they can ride it out in time, but they've got to have a food source and water source, and they ought to try and protect that, close it up, seal it off if possible, as long as food is in containers and water is in containers so that it doesn't access the atmosphere, it would be useful. They also, of course, ought to provide some capability, if they can, for lighting and other things. I'm not sure how they're going to prepare their food, but is natural gas available to the people in Zaporizhzhia or in the area?
I'm not sure. I think now it's available, but when the town or village is in war zone, so the infrastructure is damaged. And this is a big problem in the war line zone, where people can't get water, can't get gas because all the infrastructure is ruined, just ruined, destroyed. Yes.
I think that's what Putin is using since he can't seem to win it on the battlefield, if he can simply cause the people so much, maybe they'll put pressure on Zelensky to do something else. But what I think they just need water source and the rest some food, cover it up, try and provide, if possible, store a little bit of water if they can. Well, it's still good. It's possible that it could contaminate the water. It could also contaminate outside food if they had crops or such. What they should do is just eat whatever is available already in the house, hopefully packaged.
And in case of nuclear war, because now we are discussing this possibility as Putin can use its nuclear weapon. So what your advice is to how to be prepared? What should we do for that?
Yeah. I think Putin will not do that, because if he does, NATO will simply destroy Russia, not only Putin, but Moscow and some of the other areas. So the threat is so great. Only if Putin decides to go mad and just take all of the people down with him, which would be credible. And there's enough oligarchs and other folks around in there that I think that would prevent Putin from trying to exercise a weapon. I would hope not. The assumption is, on the basis of the intelligence community in the West, Putin will not use a nuclear weapon. He knows, for example, there are nuclear submarines off in the Mediterranean. They can easily wipe out Moscow. One submarine would provide enough warheads and the rest. Now, that would be a terrible thing, to destroy the people in Moscow and the impact. So I don't think the people around Putin will allow him to do that, unless he turns us insane. I don't know. He seems to be credible. I think he's concerned about his life. Now, Hitler, when he was wiping down the Second World War, wanted the people to come out and fight, and he didn't care if the German people went down with him, because he thought they had failed him. Now, when a dictator gets that kind of a model where he thinks, well, if all is lost, I'm not going to be the only one. I'll take down my entire country and people with me, which is a terrible thought. Fortunately, Hitler did not do that. What it'll be with Putin, I don't know.
Yes, if we speak about Putin, so all, as for me, all the things he does looks mad, because they go everything's worse and worse and worse, and I can't understand why did he start this campaign, as it was very silly. He did only worse for himself and for his country. But the question is, are you studying the experience of Ukraine in overcoming the crisis, and what conclusions can you already make on this?
Well, yeah, I don't think there'll be a nuclear event associated with him. It is possible he could damage not only the Zaporizhzhia reactor, but also maybe some contamination from Chernobyl that might affect him. But it would take a lot to try and distribute it over the air. Although the big concern on my part is if there's some kind of an eruption, and even if a weapon goes off in Ukraine, it's going to spread the materials again, because it's on the landscape and the rest. I think what they need is food and water and ability to shelter. I don't know. I would hope that natural gas is available to them. If not, then they perhaps ought to gather some wood or other products. You got to keep warm. It's very cold in Ukraine, isn't it?
Yeah.
It can freeze just much colder than it is here in the United States. But that would be the concern. I don't think really that, unless Putin goes mad, I don't think he will initiate or carry out a nuclear campaign, because I think there are enough people under him. For Putin to say, throw a nuclear weapon, he can't do it physically. He's got to have his own chain of command. And I think those people realize that's going to destroy my family too. I won't follow his orders. I'm going to resist. In spite of him asking about it, I know if that's the case, I'm not only destroying myself, but my family and my country. So barring that Putin goes mad and is allowed to carry that out, I think the military would refuse. Even if Putin orders a nuclear attack, it wouldn't be carried out.
Yes, and how do you see the future of nuclear energy in the world in light of the fact that some countries have decided not to use their nuclear power plants, but now we see that if you depend on one source of energy, it's bad to you because you can be blackmailed?
I agree. I'm very biased. I've got to recognize I'm a nuclear scientist and the rest. But I think nuclear, of all of those around, there's potential a little bit for radiation. Well, there are a lot of these other issues. The background radiation might increase a factor of 1 or 2 or 3. Well, there's that much variation across the world. So nuclear is really, it would be well noticed. Germany, as a consequence of some of the accidents there, they decided to close it down. Angela Merkel closed them down. Now, with cutoff of natural gas from Russia, those plants would keep up and they would operate and do well. I understand that actually the German government is considering bringing back online temporarily because it's a political issue. See, they're very sensitive. I think that if they need to, they will do it. I think there'll be enough pressure. If I've got people freezing in their homes, shouldn't I make a decision to try and, regardless of my attitude about nuclear, if you really need it and it's an essential resource, do it.
And what about what should the state do? What does it have to have them some special medicine for the case of nuclear pollution? Maybe I'm not sure I can pronounce it correctly. Iodine or something like that. Is it necessary? What should a state have do for prepared for such kind of situation?
Even with a nuclear attack, unless they're actually in the middle of, it's like a gun explosion on the ground. If you're a few meters away from it or such, you're going to survive. People have overplayed this idea associated with the radiation background and the risk. So what? There are people in Brazil that undergo 10 times the background of radiation that the people in the United States do, and they survive well. So radiation poses a great fear to them. Now, obviously, you don't want to put it in your body. That's why water and food should be clean. The external radiation is probably pretty negligible. I ran a nuclear reactor at the University of Utah, where I was previously, and my students got it. They knew how to handle it, and the rest, you did not eat your lunch when you were working with radioactive materials, or you didn't breathe the air that came off the reactor because it might have some contamination. I don't know what situation. Do you know what they are in Ukraine? Is it unlivable and unbearable? I get the feeling that there's no light, there's no food, no heat.
Yes, in some places the situation is like humanitarian disaster. And one more question about the construction of power plants. If a power plant is out of electricity, so it can't, its lines are cut. So is it a dangerous situation?
No, not really. I think the plant can be shut down and operated. Notice what's attractive about the nuclear plant is that it already has its fuel within the reactor. It can operate for several years without being. For example, if it were coal and natural gas, if that gets cut off, I don't produce the power. The big problem with the nuclear plant and in Zaporizhzhia is the ability to transmit the power away from the plant to the people in the area.
And I must say one positive moment which we observe now, that this war made Ukrainians as a nation. Now we are really a real nation, and no one can say that Ukraine is a failed state, because you can see them so much people are united. They act all together, and so they are united with one idea to win. and to
Freedom,
show yes, to get our freedom and to build a new Ukraine, more beautiful, more better and better. Thank you very much. It was nice to meet you, and my report is going to be on air, I think, on Monday.
I think just as the collapse in Germany during the Second World War and the rest. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.